You're listening to The Mountain Spirit, a podcast of Christian Appalachian Project, or CAP for short. This is a place where we get to share with you inspirational stories of faith, service, and compassion. I'm your host, Tina Bryson. I'm a firm believer that we're all connected by our shared humanity, and that finding that intersection sometimes just means having a conversation. Today we get to hear from Chris Green with Berea College in Berea, Kentucky. He's the director of the Loyal Jones Appalachian Center, Associate Professor of Appalachian Studies, and Chair of the Appalachian Studies Department. I hope you enjoy the show. Have you ever met someone whose voice just welcomes you in? That's Chris Green. He will tell you that he loves people, and in that, he loves helping people tell their stories. But even deeper still, he is passionate about people being heard. Because Chris believes that whatever they share with him, no matter the story, it helps him to learn and grow. And in that learning and growing, he strives to share a more complete story of Appalachia. There's a rich cultural diversity in the Appalachian Mountains, starting with Native Americans who originally inhabited the area. Under President Andrew Jackson, the Indian Removal Act of 1830 was initiated. This was a government-mandated program that forcibly removed many Cherokee people from their ancestral lands in the Appalachian Mountains. And between 1820 and 1920, more than 60,000 European immigrants settled in the Appalachian coal fields. And between 1870 and 1930, African Americans leaving the Deep South during the Great Migration also came to work the coal fields and the surrounding timber camps. This also added to the diversity of the region. But there was also a surprising array of religious diversity as well. Jewish and Islamic congregations, as well as Protestants and Catholics. Berea College, home of the Loyal Jones Appalachian Center, is itself a living example of the rich diversity in the region. Since its founding, Berea College has believed in the power of education for whites and blacks, men and women. This focus on inclusivity helped to create a remarkable learning and living community in a slaveholding state before the Civil War. An ardent abolitionist, the school's founder chose the motto, "God has made of one blood all peoples of the earth." Chris feels blessed to be a part of this diverse history. And when you hear him, you'll see why.
I love helping people tell their stories and people feeling heard. And I love to hear people's stories. If I had to be careful, if I go out of my office and somebody, we have a visitor coming to the center and they want to tell me a story of their grandparent, I'm just going to sit down in a rocking chair. Because whatever they're going to share, I'm going to learn. And I learn about that person's heart. I learn about their world, where they're from. And I grow from those stories too. So I am passionate about helping our students hear their stories heard, about enabling and working with the other organizations that are at Berea College, such as Grow Appalachia, which works for not-for-profits throughout the Appalachian region to help families grow gardens, or working with Brushy Fork Institute. So these are all people who are empowered to help people tell stories. I'm excited then that I get to teach students about how to listen. So I had a project where I had students go do interviews with folks, and I wanted to know, why is this person's life here? They interviewed people who worked with Appalachia around Berea. And they're like, what's your story? They didn't know what is your work, why is it important. They want to tell me about you. Tell me about your stories. And we turned those into poems. And then we created an anthology from them and gave those back as a gift to people. And those were, my gosh, pretty good things that people said. So we just honored what people said. The form of the poetry helped it be heard a little bit better too. And that's what I'm passionate about. I think in large part, because when I was growing up in Lexington, Kentucky, which ain't Appalachia, right? Even though my step-parents are from the region, my stepdad's from Garrett County, my stepmom's from Harlan, I never knew about the region. But it was a professor, Gurney Norman, at the University of Kentucky, who just retired a couple of years ago. He brought me under his wing and said, well, let's go out and talk to the authors of the region. And it was through those authors and through my awareness of the disjunctions of wealth in the region, because this was back in the days when the broad form deed was still active. And for your listeners who might not know about the broad form deed, let's say that one of their great grandparents had signed away their mineral rights under the house where they're living right now. Right now, they have to imagine this. Well, that means that that coal company could come in and carve away everything and just leave the very structure of their house on top of a little bit of ground and take their coal. Kentuckians did a constitutional amendment against that. And I was really amazed to see that, and have come to know a lot of people who work with that. So with Appalachia and my passion for it, it's because I have a passion for people's care for each other and for how to care for where they're from. And that's what was really taught and motivated me. Berea was formed first in 1855 by an abolitionist who was looking to have a place where whites and blacks could learn together in equal terms, men and women learn together. And that's John G. Fee, who was our founder. He was driven out as we came to the Civil War, and he came back afterwards and brought other folks with him. And that's when real Berea was founded. There's a lot of history there, a lot of really important history. We were equal number of white and black students up to about 1890. With the coming of Jim Crow and other pressures, Berea began to swing towards looking less support of African American and whites, but still African Americans, and began broadening it to whites. Because a lot of the white people at this time were from the North, actually. They weren't some were from the Appalachian region, and our African American students were actually from places like Clay County, in addition to. So it wasn't a Berea that people think of at this time. When the Day Law happened, and this was in 1904, and the Kentucky legislature outlawed that blacks and whites could learn together because they said it was going to cause race riots and a race war. And of course that was anything but true. And Berea fought it all the way to the Supreme Court. But then Berea had to separate. And the endowment was split at that time, half going to the Lincoln Institute, which were for the African-American students here at Berea at that time. Now, one person you might not know who was from Berea at this time is Carter G. Woodson. And Carter G. Woodson, the founder of Black History Month, Black History Week of the Day, the founder of really Black Studies in some ways, he originated here in Berea, but he was from West Virginia, where he had come in and worked as a coal miner, and he had taught people to read in the coal mines there with his elders. And before he became a principal in Huntington, West Virginia, and then he came to Berea before he would go on to Harvard and the University of Chicago to get his big degrees. After this moment, Berea became more and more committed to the Appalachian region itself. And it looked both at working class people, everyday people, and it looked at college graduates, and it always had. As Berea went on, our commitment to the region continued to grow, and with that became into the 1960s, where the people at Berea were seen as kind of experts on what was going on in Appalachia. This is where some of the first studies of Appalachia came out of. In 1970, the group that was helping to lead that was called the Council of Southern Mountains, and they weren't Berean, but they were closely allied. That's where Loyal Jones came from. And Loyal Jones, with that group, then came into the college, and these were the people who had been leading the war on poverty, which was really important. That underlays a lot of roots for us throughout the region. And he came to Berea and brought all of that knowledge with him, and that's when the Appalachian Center opened with him too. And we're still riding the waves of that work today. Berea itself, I will say this is important, did begin to reintegrate in 1951. And our first African-American students were from Western Virginia too, which was wonderful with it too. Right now, Berea is one of the most diverse liberal arts colleges in the nation, about 40% students of color. We have students from all over the world, 8% international students. About half of our students are from the larger Appalachian region, but also including all of Kentucky, Louisville, Lexington, the Cincinnati region. I think of Berea as being the place where people come to learn about each other and to learn from each other across all these bridges of differences. In the middle of this, though, Berea still maintains its really strong commitment to the Appalachian region. When I look at Appalachia, people will come in and think, well, what's here? I've got my corn, I've got my coal, I've got my cabins. And there's a much richer history in that, both in terms of the immigrants who have been here, the people who are here before the immigrants, the kind of work that is done in Appalachia. And we are here to embrace and celebrate and study and work with everybody and everything in that. So for instance, crystals that are in our computers probably came from a North Carolina silica mine, which is some of the purest silica in the entire world in the North Carolina mountains. So people don't know that the very things that they use, or the little Debbies that they may be eating right now, listening to this, come from Appalachia. And little Debbies were founded in Chattanooga, Tennessee. In the same way, we hold up the whole peoples of Appalachia. So while Appalachia is always building on the history, it's always changing its history too, and it's always building it too, because people love their past in the area. They love knowing who came beforehand and where people were. Part of what we do, though, is we hold up the entire group of people, because oftentimes when people are first learning about the region, they don't really have a sense of its racial diversities. And so we're always dancing with everybody.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Do you want to have fun this summer while saving money for college? Be a summertime superhero as a camp counselor with Christian Appalachian Project at one of our 2 beautiful camps. You'll have a great time and make a difference in the lives of kids in Eastern Kentucky. Our camp counselors have a blast outside boating, creating arts and crafts, and playing games with our campers. The kids love the activities, but what they remember most about camp are the volunteers who cared enough to spend their summer with them. While you're here, you'll earn an educational award that you can use towards college or trade school, and other benefits too, like a financial stipend. Email volunteer@chrisapp.org. That's volunteer@CHRISAPP.org, or text 859-797-3059 to learn more. We can't wait to hear from you.
If you get a chance to visit the Loyal Jones Appalachian Center, it will expand your view of the region, its culture, and the people. Appalachia has given us icons like Dolly Parton, who became a country music legend but never forgot the place she calls home. Her charitable and philanthropic efforts have had a resounding impact on the region and beyond, including a number of projects to bring education and poverty relief to East Tennessee, where she grew up. Loretta Lynn, an icon in her own right, became one of the most distinctive performers in Nashville in the 60s and 70s. She shook things up by writing her own songs, many of which tackled boundary-pushing topics drawn from her own life experiences as a wife and a mother. Coal miner's daughter tells her life story of being raised in poverty in Kentucky. Chris already mentioned Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who dedicated his life to educating African Americans about the achievements and contributions of their ancestors. He was born in 1875 to illiterate parents who were former slaves. As a teen, he worked in the coal mines of West Virginia. He later earned his bachelor's degree from Berea College. Some lesser-known sons of Appalachia have made their own place in history. Entertainer Steve Harvey was born in West Virginia. He's the son of a coal miner who later died from black lung disease. Booker T. Washington, a noted historical figure, was born in Virginia. He worked in the salt furnaces and also in the coal mines when he was young. Washington would later become the founder of what is now Tuskegee University. The mining of coal is a through line of many Appalachian stories. Between 2005 and 2020, though, the coal production in the United States fell about 54%, and in Appalachia, it dropped more than 65%. In southeastern Kentucky, there are many small communities that are scattered all over the mountains, and many of these were once coal company camps. According to an article in the New York Times, the departure of coal companies left the population dispersed in small communities throughout the mountains. This stretched water lines, roads, and other vital infrastructure very, very thin. With the gradual disappearance of coal came a dramatic reduction in tax revenue, leaving much of this infrastructure crumbling. Statistics also showed a population that was older, poor, and in worse health than much of the country, and thus heavily reliant on social and health services. In addition, the land itself has changed over the decades as coal companies stripped away hillsides and blew the tops off mountains to get at the riches underneath. Researchers have found that the treeless land that is left behind, if not carefully restored, can increase the speed and volume of rain runoff, worsening floods in the mountains in the years to come. Chris Green highly recommends the book, What You're Getting Wrong About Appalachia. As additional voices rise up through books, documentaries, podcasts, and other media to bring history to light, it paints a fuller picture of Appalachia. And that's good news for us all.
Well, I already mentioned Carter G. Woodson, which should be a little bit of a jaw dropper to folks who know Carter G. And if you don't know Carter G, go look him up right now. Carter G. Woodson, go, come back, hit pause, go read about Carter G. Just amazing. Another person who is like this is Bill Withers. So there are a lot of these singers who come out on national stage who we hear wherever they're being produced, or whether or not they're artists, and they are from the Appalachian region. And they're not from, that is where their deep roots are, where they became themselves. I will say this, there are other people who come to Appalachia who are deeply changed and informed by it too. Because somebody doesn't have to be from Appalachia to become closely connected with it and to be transformed by it and to become part of it. And Bell Hooks is one of those people. Bell Hooks, for people who don't know her, is one of our nation's leading change makers, although she passed away a few years ago, around issues of equality for all people, women especially. She's from Hopkinsville, Kentucky, in western Kentucky, but she lived in Berea for 10 years. And here she came to think about what belonging meant and how people connected in a whole new ways for her heart. And so I really encourage people. Women will know her name in Central Africa. They will know her name in the big universities. And Bell Hooks has this book of poetry that I encourage everybody to look at. I would say the best single book, and this is a fast book, it's by Elizabeth Catte, Catte, and it's What You're Getting Wrong About Appalachia. Isn't it a great title? It's a very slim book, but it just goes in and it lays out the mythologies that people have, and instead it helps dispel those stories. So it's very readable, it's very small. Now it's a little fiery. It can be a little fiery at times too. But that's the place I would send people at first. I would send them to the West Virginia Encyclopedia, which is online. And so people can just type that in, West Virginia Encyclopedia. And West Virginia is all Appalachia. And there's a lot of commonalities between West Virginia and Eastern Kentucky. And so that they can look at the articles there. That's another really accessible place to go and think about it too. The University Press of Kentucky has a lot of books about Appalachia. And Silas House is currently running a series dedicated to authors of color from Appalachia too. And I would send folks to that series as well. I would suggest go look at University Press of Kentucky's website and type in the word Appalachia and see what you see. And that's where you'll also find Bell's book. I think that there's one type of Appalachian. I think there are, in Eastern Kentucky especially is what I'm thinking of here. Oftentimes Eastern Kentucky is a place that suffers under some of the greatest stereotypes in our nation because it has been a place of raw resource extraction for the last 120 years. And that means that people have had to have excuses or ways of understanding how people could have the land underneath of them taken from them, even though they had jobs, but they didn't own the things that they were doing. I'll just let people know this too. Eastern Kentucky, in terms of health, wealth, and education, of all of our congressional districts in the nation, 232, 336, I'm not sure how many, it's second from the bottom. And so people think that somehow when we're thinking about people being poor or being relatively poor, relatively undereducated, right? Because there's certainly college-educated people and there's certainly rich people in the region. But relative to most other people, they think somehow that defines people. But what defines people is how they carry each other and their care for themselves and they care for people around them. And you don't need a lot in order to care for yourself and to care for the people around them. And that's one of the reasons I love the Christian Appalachian Project, because you all are going in to those people who need just that little bit more step up where they can keep that self-care going on, where maybe for one reason or another, and it happens all over our nation in 100 ways, but it can happen more where people have relatively little in Eastern Kentucky. I would just ask people when they're thinking about the stereotypes to look in their head and be honest about what they see and to be open to what they will see. What I will say is that there are many Appalachias in any single Appalachia. Now, different sections have a lot of commonality. I would say that the past commonality is raw resource extraction, whether or not that was beaver pelts, whether or not that was deer skins back in the colonial day, whether or not that was wood and timber and coal and iron to feed our industrial revolution. But along with that, there are, in general, and I say in general because there's variations, a higher percentage of people of working class. There are people who are living relatively close to the land. Appalachia is this it's a hodgepodge of realities, but they're all interconnected. People are closer, I think, to each other because they are not all busy having to go 3 hours on the highway to get to work. What defines somebody is their humanness. What defines somebody is the pictures on their wall. What defines somebody are how they have a garden and who helps them with that garden and who they share it with. What defines somebody is how they choose their spiritual path with others. And what gets blocked by the number on poverty is the richness of people's lives. Not that people don't struggle, right? And if you have less, maybe you struggle a little bit more, but that doesn't mean you don't have a life. It doesn't mean you're not as thoughtful and kind and loving as anybody else. Maybe you're even more so, too. But that also doesn't mean, on the other hand, that you might not need a little help with it sometimes. And that's the gentle truth of what that number is. It does not define people, but it helps us understand one aspect of them, one aspect of a way that when we think about terms like the Christian Appalachian Project, it helps us begin to see things, but we never want it to define anybody. We want to see the whole person. And then we want to see, oh, well, this person needs help building a porch, and they don't have the resources to do so right now. We can help with that. When I think of Appalachia, I think of service, and I'm not thinking of outside folks serving people inside. I'm thinking of the way that there's a sense of openness and care that people have for each other. And for folks on the outside, they might not be able to see that at first, but if you're able to sit with somebody for a while, for a half day, and you're able, as you're helping out, you'll see it, you'll feel it too.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Your generosity has a direct and positive impact in the lives of people in need in Appalachia every day. It is the unwavering support of faithful friends like you that make this work possible. Many of our supporters are beginning to plan and envision what kind of legacy they want to leave to support the causes that are near and dear to their hearts. CAP is happy to provide a safe and easy experience for people to create a will and support CAP through non-cash gifts. Through our partnership with Free Will, CAP offers our donors the ability to create a will online and alter it at no charge. Our partnership with Free Will also includes their Smart Giving Suite, which allows donors to give through their IRA, donor advised funds, and stock online, in addition to creating a will for free. In recent years, Appalachia has faced unrelenting challenges, including the pandemic, inflation, and back-to-back natural disasters. You can make a life-changing impact and leave a legacy of hope in Appalachia. To learn more about non-cash giving opportunities, please visit christianapp.org/more ways to give.
As the director of the Loyal Jones Appalachian Center, Chris looks for ways to empower people to tell their own stories. And through that passion, he honors the center's namesake. Loyal Jones loved where he was from. And if you haven't heard of him, I'd encourage you to look him up. Chris shared that Loyal Jones had a quiet gift of telling the stories of everyday people. Even in the late 50s and early 60s, as part of the Council of Southern Mountains, he was working with and leading a group of professionals from the area who knew Appalachia and were committed to affecting change in the region so that it could thrive and grow. That spirit continues today, with Appalachians creating solutions to their own problems, including addiction. Across the nation, communities are suffering from rampant opioid misuse, and Appalachia has been disproportionately impacted by this epidemic of addiction. According to the Appalachian Regional Commission, at the turn of the millennium, the opioid overdose death rate for Appalachian counties was roughly equal to that of the rest of the country. And by 2017, however, the death rate for opioid overdoses in Appalachian counties was 72% higher than that of non-Appalachian counties. But just like Loyal Jones and the problem solvers with the Council of Southern Mountains, locals like the founder of Addiction Recovery Care are creating their own solutions. He had a spiritual awakening after his own struggles with alcoholism and felt called to serve people struggling like he did. Those efforts have expanded to over 30 addiction treatment programs. Chris knows these stories of healing and recovery are also a part of the fabric of Appalachia. He seeks to be a recovery ally who offers support to people who struggle with substance abuse. Through his leadership, He is daily creating the spaces for people to share their own Appalachian stories.
I think of the Loyal Jones Appalachian Center like a grandma's porch or a grandma's front room, right? There are pictures on the wall and histories, and amazing people are walking through the front door, and everybody feels welcome, and they leave feeling connected and always invited back. And that's why I really hope people can stop by, because we are open to the community 5 days a week from 8 to 5. And we have events all the time, too, where we're bringing in people of national stature to think about and talk about the region at the same time that we bring people from just over the county border, too. Again, because here I really value, like Loyal Jones does, I value all people, no matter what. I value the stories that they have to share to add to all of our plenty, too. And they can also play our Dolly Parton pinball machine. I hope so, too. And they'll notice that we have artifacts. We have from our 6,000-piece artifact collection that we have up and around. And it's a place where people, no matter where they look, and if they're open to it, they are going to learn things about the region. We are still working. We've recently transformed websites. That's where you can begin learning more. And you can come visit us. They can come visit us. They can give me a call on the telephone. They can send me emails. And I'd be happy to help people find things, to think about things. Because that's one thing we're dedicated to, is to helping people take the next step in their learning, whatever they want to learn on. One of the things that I'm committed to, and the center as a result is committed to, is the ruin that the opioids have brought upon people through communities throughout the nation now. But really the epicenter being Eastern Kentucky and Southern West Virginia. And so recently I worked with people from the Madison County Opioid Recovery Empowerment Project, and we were able to bring in a speaker to help us think about what it means to be recovery allies. And being a recovery ally doesn't mean you're going to go out there and cure somebody of their addiction. What that means is you're going to go out there and understand that there are addicted people out there, and that all of the community has a role by not demonizing folks, by looking to be aware of how we hold ourselves and how we speak to each other about it. Are there problems with addictions, and does it hurt people and does it hurt communities? Yeah, it does. But how I think about those things and how I hold myself toward them can help pave the road for somebody's recovery. That can pave the way for somebody saying, this is the moment I need somebody. And so we had that meeting, and for me, that meeting was just a real high point for me and the participants who were there at the end of last year. And that's a little bit of a grim side. Not grim, but I want to say it because it's still celebrating the work to be done. And we did have people who are in recovery who came here to share their stories too. And it is about being able to hear each other and value each other.
Our guest today has been Chris Green, the director of the Loyal Jones Appalachian Center at Berea College, where he is also an associate professor of Appalachian Studies and chair of the Appalachian Studies Department. We hope you've enjoyed the show and will check out next week's episode. Tell your friends to check us out too. You can follow the work of Christian Appalachian Project on all social media channels and find the show online at christianapp.org/podcast or anywhere you get your favorite podcast. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. We'll see you next week.